Begin transmission. Hello, everybody. It is Outer Rim transmission number 109. This is for Ben, for Milton, for Chris, aka Starrapter. Welcome, everybody. Today we are talking about our go-to Star Wars, our comfort Star Wars food sort of thing that we can watch or experience whatever the mood we're in. We're going to get into that later. First, we're going to just do our usual kind of thing as far as Star Wars is concerned. I'll start it off this week because I was working and, there's many TVs and gyms, obviously. And it was really funny because they were just ending A New Hope and they had the credits rolling. And I guess it must have been on TNT or something, whatever, like, plays those over and over again. Because then as soon as they were playing the credits, they had, like, another pop-up screen underneath with, like, the opening crawl of Empire Strikes Back. So it was this kind of crazy thing where it's like, wait a minute, the other movie's still going on as the other movie's beginning. And it was, like, the credits and then the opening crawl going into the credits up above. I'm like, this is absolutely bizarre. And I'm working with my client. It's like, oh, Star Wars is on. And she's just like, oh, clearly not a Star Wars fan or anything, but I thought it was like really strange how those two things were simultaneously going on at the same time.
Oh yeah, you see those on TNT on the weekends quite a bit really. Like it's always TNT. I think they have the license to it or something. But
Yep.
yeah, so like it's cool. Of course we all can access it on Disney Plus and everything. But like anytime I see any of the Star Wars movies on TNT and it's like the final 20 minutes or even if I just don't feel like clicking onto Disney Plus, I'll just like lay there on the couch like half awake in the evening on a Saturday or Sunday night and just let whatever movies on TV play from TNT. So like I don't know, it's always kind of like cool seeing it on TNT, but yeah, like you said, Chris, I've noticed that before too. Like when the movie's ending, you're seeing the credits roll as the opening credit is rolling as well.
Yeah, so I was just like, okay, that's a new way to experience Star Wars that I've never experienced before.
Mm. Yeah,
Oh,
they've always been like TNT's pretty consistent about showing those movies. I think they're on like every other weekend or every weekend. Like
Yep.
I feel like they're always on.
yeah, it's
I
either
know I know
that,
they
yeah.
started. I think they have like a 10-year thing or something with the Star Wars films or something. But I mean, and TNT's a really good network where like they're pretty good about the transition of like any like movie franchise that they are working with. So if like you said, one's playing with the credits, they'll have another one like pop up like a dual screen just to transition into it. So it kind of smart business because viewers can't really leave, and then go like leave their network to go to another station, especially if they're into the movie.
Hmm. Yeah, it's something that we don't think about a whole lot because that's the only time I ever see live TV. I'll be honest, is when I'm at the gym and I'm like, it's right there in front of me. I'll take a look or whatever. But with streaming, we're so used to this instant gratification that we don't want to have commercials. We don't have that. So it is a good tactic on the live TV to be like, all right, well, we're gonna have one begin instantly, so it's almost like the same sort of thing. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, same here, and I've never really watched like was it Pacific Rim
Yep.
franchise, but literally the last time I actually watched live TV like that was they were playing the first one, and like I watched like the last 10 minutes of the first one, and it transitioned into the second one on TNT. And again, I didn't watch it all the way through, but that was a good way of a non-fan of those particular franchises to be like, oh wait, oh the first one ended, oh second one's about to start.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, now it makes me want to probably get them on Blu-ray and actually
Huh.
watch them all the way through because it was interesting what I was seeing. But if you're a casual Star Wars fan in that nature, you're like, oh wait, there's a New Hope, and oh wait, the Empire's coming on. I haven't really seen this one, or I haven't really paid attention to it. That's a perfect way to get another fan sucked in
Well,
to the
well,
property.
well, see, here's the thing. Like with me, when I've had that happen before, I finished watching Empire Strikes Back when it was on TNT before, and it
Mm.
had the credit thing rolling, and even me being a hardcore fan, knowing Disney Plus, seen the original trilogy 10 million times, I said, well, let me just sit here for another 20 minutes. I'll watch until the first commercial break of Return of the Jedi.
Right.
I've done that before, and then I change it or I just go do whatever I'm
Yeah.
gonna do. But I'll watch till the first commercial break, the first 15 or 20 minutes, just because it's like it's Star Wars,
Hmm.
and it's like, hey, I can watch 20 minutes of Star Wars real quick.
Exactly.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. So, Milton, I hear that you went to a toy fair recently.
Mm.
Anything related
Yeah,
to
I was
Star
there.
Wars there?
Say that again.
It's kind of a dumb question, but anything related to Star Wars there. Anything with
Oh
toys,
yeah,
there's
well,
always
yeah,
Star
you're
Wars.
right. I mean, yeah, it is a dumb question, but it's a great question. So let's acknowledge that. Yes. So today I went to this place that's always they do this once a month, like the next two towns over from where I live. And when I walked in today with my friend, we were looking. He's like, "Hey, what are you looking for today?" I'm like, "I don't know. Like, something has to pop. That's when I'll buy something at this particular place." As we're looking around, I see this older guy, got to be in his 50s,
Hmm?
literally on his shoulder. He's carrying an Imperial at no S is it which one before the Walker
An
AT-AT?
AT-AT.
Yeah, he's
AT-AT.
carrying a big AT-AT on his shoulder that he just
What?
bought.
Oh.
And it was huge, and I was like,
Awesome.
damn, oh boy, I was like, literally, I said, I'm like, he's literally carrying a Walker like it's nothing. It's like holding a child. Um, And it was cool though, because I was like, okay, now I might want to buy something. So today there was a lot of Star Wars stuff. A lot was Legos.
Hmm.
A lot of it was Legos. And I almost bought an X-wing Lego set.
Ooh.
It's like 140 pieces, or maybe a little bit more than that. And it was like $35. The guy was telling me, and I was like, man, I should. But then it's like, I don't know where to put it if I put it together.
Yep.
Because I'm not going to take it to my office and put it in there. I'll be too scared that someone's going to touch it. And then I saw today, this one guy had a Black Series. I think he had a Black Series X-wing or Darth. No, was it X-wing or Death Star? It was something. It was like 7,000 pieces or something, and it
Whoa.
was in the box. And I can tell he never really opened it because we joked about that. We're like, well, there's no point in even opening that type of like toy because it's 7,000 pieces, Black Series. You'd be too scared to lose a piece. He said that's exactly why I'm reselling it because I never opened it. And I was like, okay. He was like selling it for like $500.
Oh, maybe it was
So,
a
but
Death
yeah,
Star.
there was Legos. There
Oh.
were ships. There were a lot of figs. There was a whole bunch of like Power of the Force figures.
Oh, yeah.
Love those.
Black Series, yeah. Because the one guy I walked up on, I was like, "Do you have any Power of the Force?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I got these right here." There's a couple Phantom Menace
Mm.
series ones. Yeah, I mean, and then how like the Hot Wheels, Star
Oh,
Wars
yeah.
Hot Wheels
Yeah,
cars
yeah.
were
Yep.
there. It was a mix of everything. Obviously, Funko Pops, they're always there. But yeah, these places that I go to, I usually try to look for like Star Wars, wrestling, or like vintage games. My friend who I was with, he's a big Hot Wheels guy. So
Huh.
he today bought like some Hot Wheel covers. And then we went to the home store that sponsors this event, and their Funko Pop selection is sick. And then they
Oh.
had a whole bunch of other Lego stuff there too. And we were looking at it as well. And they also had an Imperial Walker there too. That was pretty
Mm.
dope. But yeah, I always try to look. You said Star Wars, Hot Wheels, Funko, Power Rangers, wrestling and video games, that type of thing. So
Oh, okay. What was the last
Man,
wrestling thing you bought? You buy like
what's
the
up?
figure? You buy like what are they like 6-inch wrestling figures? Like
Uh, yeah, they're about
something?
like
Oh, a
this
little
big.
smaller. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I try to usually get guys that match up like a set. So, I mean, I don't know how big you are into wrestling, Chris,
I have
but
zero
I
knowledge
like
at all.
yeah, I like like I'm an old school WWF like Monday Night War guy, WCW, WWF kid, Attitude Era. I'm sure Ben knows what
yep.
that is.
Yep. Oh
But
yeah.
like I like the
Love it.
Hart Foundation. I like the NWO. I like the Nation of Domination. Rock, Hogan, Austin, all those guys from mid '90s. So let's say 1995 to 2003. Like that's my era.
Yep.
Um, like I'll give guys from that era because I just love that. That's my childhood. I mean,
Hmm.
I watch wrestling a couple times a week when I'm like I'm working out at the gym. I'll put a video on just to get hyped up, or I got a group chat of wrestling buddies that we talk wrestling and pay per views. We're going to WrestleMania next year in Philly,
Oh
so
shoot, that's gonna be huge.
yeah, I have to figure out how I'm going to pay for it, but we'll figure it out. Yeah. So because I mean that's WrestleMania that comes once a year, but it's like they don't
Once
ever
in a
make it an East
lifetime.
Coast thing. Yeah, it's once in a lifetime
It's
on
like
in our.
Celebration, right? It goes somewhere different every year.
Yeah, the difference is though, Celebration does like their normal like routine of like Orlando's, Anaheim, Chicago's. WrestleMania is such like they'll go to the big markets where like the newer stadiums were built, like the Los Angeleses, like the
Yeah.
Florida, like the Texas. The last time they had WrestleMania in Philadelphia or in Pennsylvania was 1999 or 98.
Dang.
It was 99 because it was in the old Spectrum Stadium. That was, I was a kid. I was 12 the last time it was here. And then they had it in New Jersey at MetLife.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say in 2016.
Yeah, that
I
was
think.
kind of recent. I do remember people talking
Yeah,
about it.
but that was at MetLife. Whatever. That was brand new. That was one of the rare times they've had it in that New York metropolitan area. So if you're having it in my home state, and I'm only 2 hours and change from it, might as well.
Yeah, just pay the hotel. Just splurge a
I mean,
little
come on,
bit.
man. I got people that live in that area.
Oh,
I'll figure
okay.
out a way to stay with somebody without the paying. No, I'll pay for the ticket because it's a 2 night event too. So,
Oh, okay.
but
Well,
yeah, I mean, like anytime I go to these conventions or stores or comic book stores that are around me, like I definitely try to make a point to look at things that I want to collect, but also I'm interested in Star Wars, Marvel, DC, whatever. I think it's important that people understand like how cool that stuff is, just because if you're in your 30s and 40s and even probably early 50s, you grew up on this stuff. You grew up on
mm-hmm,
comic books. You grew up on Super Nintendo and Sega, and Dreamcast and GameCubes and Star Wars and GI Joe, whatever.
mm-hmm.
It's like it's nice to see that people are still interested in that, and they're your age and they look
Yeah.
like you, they act like you, and it's kind of like that thing that brings everyone together. There's so much drama and negativity and bullshit out in the world, and it's like when you go to these places, it goes out the window for like a good hour and a half, 2 hours. You're like, you know what? It's okay just to be yourself and be a nerd and just chill, man. I love that.
Oh yeah, Ben. So have you been anything like that recently? Like Milton's talking about?
Um, Nothing like that recently, but those type of places, like we used to have a place, it was kind of like, some of the places you've described before, Milton. It was kind of like a vintage video game slash
Hmm.
like toy collector place we had here in town a few years ago, and they closed. That was open for my entire lifetime, literally until just 2 years ago, basically. And they were always a really great spot because they would have those like Power of the Force figures or the 64 games or the Super Nintendo games or those type of things. And like being a Star Wars fan, it's always great seeing those type of things there because like you were saying, Milton, like everybody that's like in their upper 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s right now, they were either kids or in their 20s when all of these things were coming out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
people that are around 50 now are, were probably like 25 years old, 26 years old in the 90s. So like,
Yeah.
they grew up with those things. If they were Star Wars fans, they were like we are right now, like younger 20s and 30s, getting these figures and stuff. So like that's always like a great part of the Star Wars fandom in my opinion. And like especially when it comes like for me, God, if I would go to any of these things that have like the Power of the Force figures, I would have to like lock my wallet in the car or something because I would probably be
That's
irresponsible
the
on
problem. Yeah.
nostalgia because I'd be like, oh man, I need this, I need this, I need this, and I'm like,
Yep.
I'd mega impulse buy when it comes to like some of those nostalgia bait things.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's so funny too because the day before we went to this one mall in Maryland,
Huh.
and again, I'm a huge sports fan, as we all are. Well, Chris, I don't know about you. I don't know if you even like sports like that.
Not
And I know
really.
you do.
Yep.
And like then I'm sure you heard of the store like Bleacher Bums or like Hibbert Sports or that type of thing.
Yep.
But like when I walk into these places, it's like, man, I want this, I want that, blah blah. Like I'm like that when I go to these conventions too, because like I said, Power of the Force figures. Like I think of like the commercials when I was a child,
Yep.
or like there was a figure there that was like a Toys R Us exclusive
Whoa,
back in
really?
like the late 2000 or early 2000s. It's like, yeah, I remember that. I remember how hot that was to
Hmm.
bug your parents about going to Toys R Us. Like now I can order stuff off of Amazon or like anything online, to get something right. Back in the day, you see a commercial, you're like, oh my, sold at Toys R Us. You're like, can we go to Toys R or KB Toys? Can
Yeah,
we go to
KB Toys.
KB Toys, yep. Hey,
Yeah.
shout out KB
Oh
Toys.
man.
Yeah. You know, look, you know what I'm saying? Like, can we go here? And you go to these places, and like that was like your reward for the week. As
Mm-hmm.
a child, you're like, oh my
Yep.
god, I'm gonna look at like this video game, or like I'm gonna look at this figure, or blah 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 blah. Like again, I remember, I'll never forget my birthday in 1999. Okay, Phantom Menace came out that
Same.
May, and I know for a fact because the tape came out quick that year. I was even thinking about it now. I'm surprised we got it so quick. My birthday is July 29th, and I remember I got the Phantom Menace tape that summer. I don't know how. And I wore that thing out, but I remember like bugging my parents about going to like KB Toys
Uh-huh.
and other places like to get like the Star Wars action figure or get into like the movie, because I think they sold the movies at those toy stores too sometimes. And I'm like, yeah, like I'll never forget that 1999 birthday. I was 11, and I was like, yeah, it was awesome. Like
Well,
just going to Toys R Us, just getting figures or KB Toys or whatever. It's like, yeah.
that's one of the biggest parts of like being a Star Wars fan is like getting these collector's items, and whether they be figures or lightsabers or whatever. Like I just retro over on my dresser right now, and like
Oh.
I got Luke's lightsaber, a couple years ago, and
Yeah.
like that lightsaber, I had never bought a really nice collectible like that because that's a metal saber and all that,
Oh.
and like eventually I was thinking the one day I was like, you know what, I've never bought myself like something really nice like collectible wise. So I was like, you know what? I paid the $150 for it, and it's awesome. You can take the blade out. It has like a display stand. You can set the hilt on, like
Yeah.
all this stuff. It has a wall mount thing, like those type of things. Like, sure, don't get me wrong. It's just sitting on my dresser there, but like that's a collectible I'll be able to keep forever. And it's the famous Skywalker saber, so it's just I don't know,
Right.
like those type of collectibles. I think are just so nice to have, whether it be those, whether it be some of the figures. Like one of my favorite figures I have from years ago was it's like from Attack of the Clones. It's a Jango Fett figure
Ooh.
that lets you totally take all the armor off, so he's just in the
Oh.
Camino garb, or you can put the armor on, and it's literally every single armor piece you imagine, like the upper arm, the forearm, the glove, everything are individual pieces. Like it's literally like a 20-piece armor set. Like
Wow.
every armor piece is an individual plate, so you can like fully customize like Jango Fett's look and everything. So it's like it's one of the coolest like figures I have from back then from Attack of the Clones. Like I have that one, and I mean I have plenty of those other ones probably up in the attic. But yeah, like those figures and a lot of those things, were such like a great part of like all of our childhoods, and I'm sure plenty of our listeners and viewers on here childhoods, like people in our 20s, 30s, 40s range, like especially.
Yeah, it's great, but it's also kind of crazy because I look at my niece and my nephew, and they don't have anything like that, or at least the kids don't care that much these days about stuff
Right.
like
Well, they have
that anymore.
tablets.
They have the
It's
tablets, so yeah.
hard to say. They got everything's instant gratification, and I don't want this to turn into get off my lawn type old person, because it's not that. Because again, I like video games too, and I'm sure the generation before us will say, well, those kids had Super Nintendo, or they had Sega Saturn and PlayStation, blah 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 blah. Like, but you're right though. I don't know any kids that are in their tweens or even younger that's saying, hey, I want to get this figure, blah 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 blah, whatever brand out there currently.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just not really pushed by the companies now to say, well, kids need to have the hard material. It's more visual. It's like, I want to be a YouTuber,
Yep.
and I want to entertain people virtually. Now, you still have people that do look at the population, or the ones that do have the YouTube channels that are unboxing.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably older, our age, with the figures, because they're like, oh, this is where like we were when we were kids. Like, I played with this stuff, so I'm gonna use this platform to get that population. The younger crowd's like, no, let me just watch the game, watch me play. And I'm like, all right, that's not really me.
Well, Milton, I have a prime example of that. So I have a younger cousin he's 11 years old, and I don't recall, other than when he was literally a baby, him having toys. Like the past 2-3 years, like his age is like 9, 10, 11, that range. All he's asked for Christmas are like, your like virtual gift cards for games and stuff. And like,
Yep,
you know,
yep.
they don't even want anything to do with like physical toys. Man, this sounds like an old man yelling at yelling at
It
clouds
does.
podcast. But it's true. It's just the truth. Like that's the truth though when it comes to this sort of stuff. Like, and that's why, I mean, I guess like, you know, those young kids are passionate about their virtual stuff, but we like our old figures.
We like the tangible elements of being able to pick up and
Well,
have
that's
our
like-
own
that's like
stories that we
physical-
make
that- well,
with the
well-
figures. Like we'd all make
Yeah.
storylines of, oh, Dash Rendar is getting his that rider. He's gonna take out,
Yep.
you know, Zizor. Then you have Luke Skywalker coming into a system. Like you had all these like, you would use your room, you would use books, you would use anything you could to like make up like little terrain and stuff like that. Like, okay,
Yeah.
this guy's gonna go out. I would literally be playing in the same room like for like 3 hours, just straight, just like going up and down the stairs, like with the fighters, like yeah, like you know.
Yeah, facts. Here's the thing. I don't know if I ever told you guys this. You know, because again, you guys know, I like comic books. I just don't read them like you do, Chris.
Yeah.
And like I do collect the ones that I do like. Like I said, I'm looking for the Vader ones right now. When I was a child, I used to make my own comic books. Like I used to like take, you know, the old school white paper with the blue lines, whatever, and used to draw like comic book strips. You know what I'm saying? I used to I just love that type of physical play. You know, and I think that's what comes down to it. It's physical play of whether it's figures, you know, you make your own terrain. It's toys that you play with. You're drawing your comic books out. Like to me, that's how I was able to stimulate myself and get away from like the real world problems as a young kid. And I think a lot of kids now, their way of physical play is virtually. They play with the stream, they stream, you know, it's whatever, and that's fine. But there's nothing wrong with that. It's just I'd rather just honestly. And I always joke with my friends. I say if I had money like this, I told my brother-in-law yesterday, if we just had random money sitting around, I would buy half the stuff that I see at these places and just either like collect it or put it together myself and just like display it. Like that would be like the dopest thing to do, just because.
Oh yeah. Nah, just
Yeah,
have to
like,
worry about the space.
my girlfriend's brother-in-law, she's probably gonna like roll her eyes because I'm telling this story. I don't care. Like when I first met him, his name is Rob. He showed me his collection of stuff. He's our age. He's a little bit older than me. It was so cool though because it's like, man, he's just like one of us, and he's got the comic books. He's got figures. He got game systems. It's like, yes, there are people out there like us that likes to do this still, and these are very successful people that just like to have a hobby on the side. And I'm like, how dope is this?
Yeah, we're getting into that day and age where our generation is literally, well, we're adults, but now we're cementing ourselves, and now we have, you know, some income that we could spend extra on some stuff, some of us, and it's like now we're seeing the fruits of that. It's interesting, like, oh yeah, what would we think of when we were 10, like how we're gonna be when we're 35 or 40, right? And it's like, oh, all of a sudden you see, like, oh yeah, we're just as we like to think we're young, even though we're older now. You know, we're all kids at heart. Like I've been taking out my skateboard that I bought literally last week because I started doing that again, and I'm like, yeah, I feel like I'm a kid again, going down freaking half pipes and stuff. You know, I'm trying to do all this stuff that I was when I was 17. It's okay so far, but I like to think that I try to infuse myself with life by just doing the things I love still when I have the chance.
Yeah, I won't be on no skateboard. That's not happening.
Yeah, no, that will not happen over here either.
Well, I realize that, oh my gosh, if I actually get hurt, then I'm kind of going to be out of work, which would actually be a lot more of a problem than it was when I was 15 or 16. It's like, I just walk around school with a cast. It's like, oh no, I can't physically work anymore for like 6 weeks if I break a bone now.
Yeah.
Gotta watch that. But yeah, I mean, those were all good times and everything, and I mean, gosh, Milton, you gave us a good opening talking point there, and kind of just like dwarfed my little baby weekend Star Wars is tiny compared to that, but no, my week this week was just kind of like I had a good laugh actually. I've been listening to the Thrawn trilogy, the original Thrawn trilogy from the 90s, and I'm on the second book. Actually, I just finished it, but it's so funny in the first two books, in Heir to the Empire and Dark Force Rising. Like, I love Star Wars. Like, I'm one of those people. I always send you Star Wars stuff all the time, Milton, on Instagram. But I'm one of those people that Star Wars is something we can like. I love it, so I can like laugh and poke fun at like some of the funny memes and just some of the funny quirkiness of Star Wars. And even in the greatness that is the original Thrawn trilogy, it's hilarious. Like, so in the first book, Luke's talking about this exotic drink that Lando introduces him to, and he's like describing this exotic drink and the exotic taste of it and everything. And he's like, he eventually gets to what it is, and it's hot chocolate. And I'm like dying laughing. And
that's the big thing, yeah.
Yep, I was cracking up laughing so much, and Luke was like, "Oh, this is like such a tasty exotic drink." Blah 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 blah. That was in the first book, and then in the second book, like I said, I just finished Dark Force Rising.
Yep.
And Luke's at this bar, and he orders a hot chocolate when he's at the bar, and it's hilarious because it's like, you have this amazing story, and then you still have quirkiness in Star Wars, even in these like basically perfect books that they are. You still have the quirkiness of Star Wars that Luke's having a hot chocolate at a bar.
Yeah, I forget what canon novel it was or comic book it could have been, but they've introduced coffee into Star Wars in year 2023.
Hilarious.
Yeah, they call it like calf or something.
But no, like they usually do. But this is the first instance of me literally reading the word coffee in Star Wars canon. Like they just put it out there, and I was the only one that said something about it, so it wasn't just me. So I was like, is there actually a difference between calf and coffee? Like, what is this? Because calf was supposed to be the Star Wars equivalent of coffee, and then that's a whole nother discussion for another day. It's just the fact of like the real world isms in Star Wars is getting like more and more. Well,
Yeah, well, they tried to pull that in The Last Jedi when they had Hux or with the your mama jokes or something.
They do your mama joke.
I'm like, all right, this is whack. I'm like, stop with that. And actually, I wanted to remind myself too about another Star Wars this week. Yesterday, so I mentioned earlier on this podcast, I went to a funeral yesterday for my grandfather. So afterwards, my brothers and sisters and we went down to this mall, and we were hanging out. And my brother and my brother-in-law went to this arcade. First thing I said to them, I was like, "We got to play the Star Wars arcade game."
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, and my brother Chris was like, "Which one was that again?" And they thought it was pinball. And I'm like, "Oh no, this is the Sega one where you're like with the thing and like you're going on like the trench run or whatever." Like, I was hyped to play this because every time I go to any car arcade, I look for that game. So we get to this arcade. I know where it's at. I'm thinking, oh, it's over here. We get there, out of commission. Like, I was so mad.
Ooh,
like, how disrespectful was that? Like, it was like offline or something was wrong with it. But I was like, damn it. Like, I was so looking forward to this because I wish I can have this system in my home because I'll play it every day if I could.
Yeah, was it the Battle Pod?
No, it's the Star Wars Trilogy Arcade.
Okay, because they have the Battle Pod, which is even better now.
No, I haven't. I don't know if I played that one, but this is the one that came out like 1997.
Oh yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
Where like if you do like the trench run, you do the Hoth planet or the Hoth snow battle, you do the indoor speeder part, and if you beat those, you can either be Luke Skywalker fighting Boba Fett with a saber, or fighting Darth Vader.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I always try to play those when I go to an arcade.
They have the Battle Pod, which is like the updated version of that. I don't know if it's like the same developer or not, but yeah, that one is always fun. Like every time we go to New York Comic Con, there's like an after party I go to every year at Sonic Boombox. It's at this Bowlmore place, which is just like, they have bowling and a bunch of arcade games. Anyway, I always play that. It's fun because it's actually like a capsule. It almost looks like Darth Vader's meditation chamber. Like it's a self-contained thing, and you have to open up a door to go in, and it like blocks out like all the lights around you, so you feel like totally immersed in this like chair and everything. It's crazy.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, it's kind of like, I think Ben, you liked my picture on Instagram yesterday with me and my brother. We were playing the Halo.
Oh yeah.
It's kind of like that. Like where like you're sitting in the middle of it though.
Yeah.
With the actual stick.
Yeah.
So it's kind of dope.
Yeah. So I guess we'll get into the show proper after a 30-minute intro. That's what happens when there's no news to talk about, so that's a sneak preview. Absolutely nothing to talk about, but a cool discussion topic. But before we get there, a little slight change in how we do things here on the channel. I'm gonna have the audio versions come out on Wednesdays or late Tuesday nights, and you can always catch us on Sundays now at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. We're starting the week off, or the weekend, however you want to put it, by being available to chat on 7 o'clock as people are winding down the week. They're getting ready for the new week. You can go ahead and hang out with us in the chat and talk about all things Star Wars. So there you go. We did have a couple releases this week. We have 3 comics. I have a video for all these 3 that I reviewed. We have Dr. Aphra issue number 32, Son of Star Wars issue number 4, and the High Republic Adventures issue number 5. So you can catch all those in my weekly roundup video of the comics. There is one actual announcement. It has to do with the comics. There is a Dark Droids D-Squad miniseries announced. This is a part of this big Star Wars event that's happening this summer, which is going to be a horror type of thing, which is going to involve something called the Scourge, which is going to be like a big virus thing that goes between all machines, cyborgs, different things that's going to screw up all these people, all these different droids and whatnot, and cause havoc. So this is going to spin out of that. And basically, this is a story about R2-D2 with a bunch of droids, including 4LOM, IG-88. We got this WAC 37 guy. We have a couple others. But yeah, this is basically like the Suicide Squad of Star Wars with droids. So I'm looking forward to that because it actually takes a page out of, I would say, an infamous Clone Wars arc with good old Meeber Gascon and A Sunny Day in the Void. If that rings a bell, then this is sort of like an homage to that, including the little pit droid character is actually going to be part of this team. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have anything to say about that, if you guys are a fan of the D Squad or anything like that, but this came out of nowhere. It's like, okay, I'm looking forward to this.
The only reason that was even on my arc, or like that arc of those droids were on my radar, was just because I was scrolling through Instagram the other day and saw a clip of George Lucas like talking about that specific droid arc from Clone Wars, and like I saw, because he was just saying it like in a joking way, but like Dave was asking him, he was like, so what's like your favorite arc from Clone Wars or whatever? And he's like, oh, it's the droid arc, or whatever, and blah blah blah. Like he like talked about it and they were just like laughing. So like that's the only reason that was even on my radar. But if it wasn't for that, I probably haven't thought of that arc in a very long time.
What about you, Milton? Did you like that arc of the little toad guy just running around droids and going in circles?
No, sounds stupid to me. I'm just keeping it 100, dude. Not interested.
It's terrible. That is like the worst arc of Clone Wars in my opinion.
I mean, it was fine.
Those are the ones that you skip through.
I mean, I like the thing with Gregor as a Republic Commando, because me as a fan of those type of units, I'm just like, oh my gosh, we actually get to see a Republic Commando in a TV series, kicking butt. And luckily we see him come later. So anyway, that comic, I don't even know when it's coming out, but the event starts in August, so probably August or September. And with that, we're going to kick it into our main topic for this evening. As the title suggests, today we are talking about our go-to Star Wars stories that can include movies, TV, animation, audio dramas, whatever you consume, whatever Star Wars stories that are your comfort food. These are the Star Wars stories we're talking about tonight. That are those stories that no matter what mood you're in, no matter how you're feeling, no matter how much time you have, no matter what you're doing, maybe you turn these on in the background as a go-to thing. These are the Star Wars stories that we specifically go to. So I'll kick this one off to kind of start it off. And I actually got this topic today while I almost, we're getting used to this new recording schedule. And I'll be honest, I was doing stuff and I realized, oh crap, I have a podcast today. A little last minute there. I was like, oh crap, I gotta get a topic. But literally yesterday, I've been working on constructing these Star Wars Shatterpoint miniatures. They're a brand new Star Wars miniature game, came out over the weekend, and so it's a lot of work gluing these things. There's a lot of time devoted to that. So rather than be there in silence, I was like, oh, you know what, this new miniature game looks a lot like Clone Wars. The characters are designed to look like they're Clone Wars. They're a little bit more elongated and stylized. So I was like, I'm gonna put on the Clone Wars from the first episode and just have that in the background as I'm working on these miniatures. And that's not the first time I've actually done that. So then I got to think, I'm like, yeah, this is like a good go-to Star Wars. Like the Clone Wars for me is just like something really fun that is also like I've seen it a bunch of times. So I kind of know what's going on, obviously, but it varies so much. And I like the idea that you have different arcs and you could just go through and it's like, I feel like watching the Umbara arc, or I like watching the Malevolent arc, or whatever like that. So for me, Clone Wars is a nice little entry point, and there's so many episodes, over 100 episodes, that you can kind of start in the middle, or start at like, Mandalore, Siege of Mandalore. That's an amazing 4 episodes little arc right there. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have anything specific you want to start off. I'll throw it to you first over there, Ben.
Talking about the Clone Wars, or just and from my
Anything
thing?
really. If it overlaps, we're probably gonna have things that overlap, obviously, and we
Okay.
can all just chime in when we do that.
Yeah.
But more of
All
an
right,
open
so-
forum discussion, I guess you could say.
Yep. So for me, the Clone Wars, that's a really good arc, or that's a really good arc. Yeah, good arc if you're gonna watch 200 some episodes or however many there are. But yeah, that's a really good, throw on in the background type thing. Because like you said, we know what's going on generally with that, and it's always fun. But for me, I would say, especially as of late, since I'm back on Audible now, I am 100% in the like audiobook thing now with Star Wars. And so as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I currently have just finished up Heir to the Empire and Dark Force Rising. And I'm going to be getting The Last Command here in a week and a half when I get my next credit for Audible. And I would say, like, for me, for sure, like, right now, and then I would say presumably going forward, just because I own them now, it'll be like this Thrawn trilogy from Timothy Zahn from the 90s, because it's so good. And like the chapters are all anywhere between 25 to 40 minutes. So you could easily put on a chapter like when you're doing laundry, when you're working out, when you're on a walk, when you're doing dishes, when you're just chilling, like with the miniatures or whatever, like anything like that, you can just throw on a chapter of the Thrawn books, and they're just so good. Like the characters, that's one thing about Zahn with this trilogy. Like it feels like he really knows every single character, like really knows them. Like he has Luke, like the way Luke's described and like the way Luke does everything in these books, like it's like what we would imagine like Luke to be, after episode 6. Like he's the hero, he's heroic, he's doing awesome Jedi stuff, like different, the typical like awesome Jedi stuff he does. And then of course, like he describes Han well, Leia well, even Chewie, and then of course Thrawn. And then the cool thing is like the way like Zahn connects like different parts of the book, like little details in the book at the beginning, they tie back in clear to something clear 3/4 of the way through the book. Like just little things like that, make this book series so dang good. And the fact that it's on Audible makes it even more fun. As I always say, I highly recommend Audible to anybody that doesn't do it or doesn't have it, or even just listening to any other form of audiobooks that you can get your hands on, because it's like listening to a movie. Like, all three of us here and any of our listeners or viewers or any more hardcore Star Wars fans, when I'm not sure about you guys, but for me personally, when I'm listening to a Star Wars book, I know Star Wars so well in terms of like the visual styles, the way the characters look, everything. I can visualize a movie in my head when I'm listening to it, So like to me, like when I'm listening to like these Thrawn books, I can picture Luke doing this like heroic shit, or like Han Solo with Lando. Oh, Lando's another big character in these books. Like I can picture Han and Lando doing these things. I can picture Mara Jade. I can picture Thrawn, like the way he walks, the way he talks, everything. Like, I can picture a lot of these things because we know Star Wars so well, so I can almost picture it as a movie. So like when I'm listening to these Audible books, it's just basically like listening to a movie at this point for me, because the way they do Audible, One thing's for sure. Shout out to Mark Thompson, the author. He's the
Facts.
best goat author there is in terms of narrating. But
Well,
like
he's not an author. He's just a
I mean,
or
voice,
narrator.
voice
Narrator.
narrator, yeah, narrator, yeah. Obviously, Timothy's on, but you know where I was going with that. But the good thing about the Audible books, and Milton, you know this especially, like I love with the audio books. You know, like I said, especially with this trilogy, like they have all the sound effects that you'd imagine, like the doors opening up, the ships,
Mhm.
the lightsabers, the beeps from R2, like
Hmm.
you know all the different little things, details of like a Star Wars movie are thrown in to these books. Like even like the sound, like the stormtroopers when they talk, you know, it's like the electronic, like the voiceover sounding a stormtrooper would sound like, stuff like that,
Brilliant.
like those little details. It makes it sound like you're listening to a movie basically. So like for me, it's 100% the Thrawn trilogy, and then just Star Wars audiobooks as a whole.
Yeah, that's
Right.
interesting. Because the way you experience it, you're explaining, Ben, is a great concept of just not knowing what the images look like, but knowing so much about the world that you're able to actually kind of piece it together in your mind. And I think that will lend to a lot of like re-listenability because you don't exactly know what it looks like, but you can kind of piece it together every time and get like more of a different concept. For me specifically,
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever really read a Star Wars book more than once. I really don't know. Like for me, like I read a book and I go right on to the next one. Mainly because there's just so many out there that I'm like, oh, I don't know if, but I understand like the idea of like the want to go back and experience something like that. It's pretty cool.
Oh,
Because for
oh yeah.
me, I just that's a whole nother thing I've kind of untouched by me. I know you and Milton both do the audiobooks a lot. And
Mhm.
I see the value in that. I really do. I mean, I listen to the audio dramas when they come out for like Dooku Jedi Lost or the High Republic ones or Dr. Aphra or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I know Milton, what you're probably gonna say already
Oh,
about all this is you're probably gonna. I bet you're gonna put out the radio dramas, aren't you?
oh, for sure. Listen, you already know. And here's the thing, and I'll speak on that briefly.
I knew my
But
I knew my point was going to lead into Milton's perfectly.
Yeah.
yeah, well, because the radio dramas, as you guys know, I got you. I talked about that for a while. I think I stand by those. That's some of the best storytelling of the original trilogy I've ever heard. Especially the first two, because Empire and New Hope, they really fleshed it out with things that were in a script that was never in the movie. You know,
Hmm.
they kind of added some of it, and they've embellished on it, but they really fleshed it out. I think that audio drama, those are some of the first early Star Wars dramas on tape that really used the sound effects. Those
Ah.
books came out. I think the radio dramas were like 1980. I think 3 for New Hope. I think
Yep.
80 something for Empire, and then 90 something for Return of the Jedi. But the way they use the sound effects, because Ben, you brought this point up, that's some of the first times they started using the Star Wars sound effects in
Hmm.
these albums and even these books. Now you go back and listen to audiobooks on tape back in the 70s, 90s, and 80s, they weren't really using a lot of those sound effects. It was just reading, and they would just read
Hmm.
next page, whatever. I think around the time of like 2000, 2001, 2002, they started really incorporating the sound effects of the movies, which is awesome. So that's my hot take on that. But yeah, radio dramas, jump on that. Like I'm telling you, if you're an original trilogy fan or want to hear what that sound like, check it out because it will just make you want to go watch the movies for
Oh
sure.
yeah, the radio dramas are excellent. Like for example, you know, as you know, Milton, the A New Hope radio drama, the first 35 minutes is basically a lot of the deleted scenes, like Biggs and
Yeah.
Luke, like you know those deleted scenes you see like on the behind the scenes stuff. That's basically fleshed out leading up to the opening of A
Hmm.
New
Look
Hope.
the
So
opening of
like
the movie. Yeah.
yeah, it's
And
so
then
cool.
some
Hmm.
of the stuff that with Princess Leia and her dad dealing with the Imperial like guys
Yeah,
that are like coming to their like hell. I think was it her dad kills like
yeah.
someone in
the
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 movie.
the imperial guy that was basically saying, you know, if you
I
marry
wasn't
me,
gonna
if
lie.
you marry me, I'll
Yeah,
like call off the dogs
Wow.
basically.
yeah. And it's
Wow.
like you don't get that in the movie, and it's like, damn, like this isn't dope we put in the film. But
Hmm.
Yeah.
anyway, that's another podcast for another day. I can talk about those rated dramas for 2 hours. Facts. Um,
Yeah.
a go-to story of mine, and I have a whole bunch because I'm a huge audio drama guy or audiobook guy. I mean, I've talked about this probably numerous times, but those Legacy of the Force books for me are just amazing storytelling. And
Perfect.
that, if people who don't know, that's post Yu Zhang Vong War.
Uh,
Luke is the Grand Jedi Master. Jason Solo, Jaina, and Ben
Mara.
Skywalker are like the main characters. So the main focus of this trilogy or these series of books. Darth Kaitis, aka Ben Skywalker, or Jason Solo, or I guess Kylo Ren. They knocked him off, but um, yeah, those books to me, they hold up till this day.
what do you think it is about them that makes you keep going back to them over and over again?
They're perfect.
Yeah, I mean, they are the sequel trilogy of the kids that we wanted to see. I mean, and again, I'm not going to knock the Disney trilogy right now. That's just not why we're here. Am I a huge fan of that? Not really. However, these books in particular, you had the blueprint right there with these 9 books. You know, you could have tweaked it. You could have made it work for Disney. But oh my God, it's perfect storytelling. Now, yeah, there are some things about those stories that are off and a little wonky, and it could have been done better. However, for as a fan of Star Wars as a child, you see Return of the Jedi, and that concludes. Okay, what happens to Luke, Han, and Leia afterwards? You're thinking, man, what is that like? And then you get the New Jedi Order books, which is Yu Zhang Vong War, which is Luke in his prime, and the kids are like Jason and Jaina, I think, are teenagers at that point. And then Ben wasn't born yet. Anakin Solo's around, but spoiler alerts, he dies. And I think Chewie dies in those books as well.
Yep.
But it's
In like the second book.
yeah, and it's like, wow, like that's a good way to start off post Return of the Jedi. And then it's like 10 years later with the Legacy of the Force, and it's like, okay, Jason Solo and Jaina and Ben at this point's born, and he's 13 years old. Like they are like the lead, and they're the next generation. Like, what does that look like for us? And then you get kind of that repetitiveness of Anakin Skywalker and Jason Solo's storyline of like, you know, the secret daughter, the secret marriage. And at that point, the Jedi weren't dogmatic about their relationships in this book, but Jason was hiding it because he was so fearful of the dark side, like destroying the galaxy. So he tried to protect it, and it was fearfulness, and he pretty much was echoing his grandfather. And it's like, man, how dope is that? And that was when the prequels were like coming out.
Yeah.
It's like, how fire is that? To me, those books are very re-listenable. If they were movies, they're rewatchable. And they were very rich in details. It challenged you as a Star Wars fan. It made you excited. It visually stimulated you without seeing it. You're like, I can hear it, and like, oh my God, I can imagine what that looks like. The battle between Jason and Jaina in the final book, you're like, man, how dope is that? And I know for a fact someone made a fan film of that fight between those siblings. It's like, how dope would that be live action? I mean, I can always go to those and be like, okay, yep, I'm good. I can listen to all 9 of them straight and be happy.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's a big factor in this conversation, right? Is we're talking about a lot of things that are digital, meaning for me, that's easy to consume, easy to be able to watch or listen because of the power of the internet and the power of streaming. We don't have to like ruffle through a bunch of books that are stacked up or anything like that. We have stuff that's like like we said before, instant gratification. Coming back full circle with that, where it's like, okay, we have Disney Plus, we could turn on whatever movie we want, whatever series. We have Audible, we can listen to like whatever it is at the at our fingertips. All like thousands of hours worth of content to consume there. Speaking of Disney Plus, I'm going to transfer over to another one of mine. I'm going to kind of go into something that's a given. This one's a complete given. I'm gonna talk about the live action series and of course Mandalorian. I think Mandalorian is something that I could always turn on in the background whenever because just the style of it it's Star Wars at its heart, even though it's not centralized around a Jedi, but it's got that popcorny kind of action vibe that there's always within a couple minutes there's always something like really cool happening on the screen. So if I'm doing something else, I have that on and be like, oh yeah, that part's really cool when he fights those Trandoshans in the second episode that are jumping and ambushing him, or oh yeah, let's look at season 3 and seeing the big battle at the end with all those different storylines with Moff Gideon and everybody fighting. Like, so for me, it's like, yeah, the Mandalorian's great because they're like 30-minute episodes. You can get through a decent amount of the season pretty quickly, without you even realizing it. And it's just something like once it's on, it's kind of like I get glued to it. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna sit down and watch it. Next thing I'm watching 3 more episodes, and it's like, oh crap.
Oh yeah.
No,
Well,
it's go ahead, Ben.
oh, I was gonna say, yeah, well, like when it comes to The Mandalorian, like it's definitely one of those shows, and just in general, not even just Star Wars, just one of those shows you can put on as a background thing. Like you said, you'll get hooked into the next episode. And if you just want to watch an episode as a one-off, like if you're eating lunch or something, you can do that as well. Like I found plenty of times before, where I'm getting ready for bed, and I literally will just turn on like The Mandalorian season 1 and just let it play, and I fall asleep and it's just on, just because it's so good. And I don't know, it just flows so well for a show, really. Like it's especially the first, say what you want about the third season, but the first 2 seasons are so strong, and you can turn those on and just let them play on loop, and
Yep.
you're entertained, and like that's one of the most important things to me when it comes to like consuming Star Wars content that is rewatchable. That's an easy watch. Like for example, okay, one movie I like Rogue One, for example. But for me, Rogue One isn't a throw on in the background Star Wars movie. It's not. Like, but for me, in comparison, if you're talking Star Wars movies, like of course, like we're on the Mandalorian subject, but when you're talking about like say Rogue One, a Star Wars movie to me that's rewatchable to throw on in the background is Return of the Jedi. Like it's upbeat. There's like it's just more like I think visually stimulating, and like you have that type of a comparison, or even Rogue One versus Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith is pretty much go 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 from the jump. So you have those varying aspects. So like that's one really key part of The Mandalorian is it's pretty like go go go. So like there's not a lot of downtime where you're like, oh man, skip. Like it's just there's always something going on.
Exactly.
I agree. No, I agree with those choices, and which reminds me because tomorrow, like me and the girlfriend are hanging out, and she actually put this out to me today. She was like, "What do you want to do tomorrow?" She's like, "Do you want to get together and watch like a Star Wars movie we talked about, or go hiking or something?" Blah blah blah. And I was just saying, "Oh, we can do whatever." But now you mentioned Revenge of the Sith because that's the one her and I need to watch. Still, she hasn't watched it yet. And so now it'll make me think I should just watch that with her tomorrow because that is one of my rewatchable movies. Like, that's a story I can go to all day. I think you're right. Revenge of the Sith, Return of the Jedi. I'll throw Empire Strikes Back in there too.
Oh yeah, Empire is really really stimulating throughout. Like it has its like the Luke training stuff is slower, but it's impactful. Like when you're watching it.
Yeah. Right. Go ahead.
Go, Chris.
No, I just want to say I think it's great, Ben, that you put out there an example of something you wouldn't want to watch, because I think it's easy to confuse sort of like this discussion of like, oh yeah, we're gonna just go to Star Wars. Okay, so just throw the best stuff out there. Even the best stuff out there, I'll be the first to admit, okay, I'm the only one on this that really loves Andor, but I wouldn't consider Andor something like if I had a rough day or something and I'm in a bad mood.
But you won't throw that on when you're building miniatures.
No.
Yeah, I'd be like, okay, this is just not doing it for me right now. I have to like pay attention. I have to be focused. And if I'm, it's a little bit darker and stuff. And the same thing with the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. Like I plan on rewatching that, but I would have to be in a certain mood to rewatch Obi-Wan, because I know there's a lot of things in there I like, but it's also a more somber story. It's a little bit more slower pace. It's not your typical usual Star Wars, right? So there's different examples that I could consider like that. Like I necessarily wouldn't put on Star Wars Resistance either. It's just like it's something that I watched once, and it's fun for its different moments, but not something that I'm gonna that's gonna be my top 5.
Right. Well, I agree, and I think too. I mean, that's a great point to bring because I love Rogue One, but you're right. It's one of those ones that you just can't watch on command. Like you got to be.
I skipped to the final 20 minutes.
Well, even that though, because I love the whole
Yeah.
Rogue One movie, but it's like, okay, if I know I'm planning out to watch a marathon, if I know if I'm telling myself this week, I'm feeling Star Wars this week, should I watch the original trilogy, the prequels? Well, I think I'm gonna start off watching Rogue One and get me worked into the originals. Like that's when you throw that on to just kind of get you revved up going to New Hope. Or if you got the prequels, hey, I want to see from Revenge of the Sith to Rogue One, or you want to throw Andor in there. That type. If you want to, hey, get up to watching Rogue One, hey, I'm gonna watch Andor seasons 1 and 2. Season 2 comes out. But you're right. Some of these things aren't really the go-to properties, and that's okay. They're not trash, not bad. It's just they're not go-to. Oh man, this is how I'm gonna introduce a random fan to it. Nah, you might want to ease them into it and then get to the more serious stuff, like that type of story later. So yeah.
Exactly. A good example. That's a great example. These are the types of things that you might have on as somebody visits you, or for like Ben, I know you do like those family parties sometimes, and
Yep.
you'll have a Star Wars movie on or something like.
It's always the OT.
You might not necessarily get somebody in on watching Attack of the Clones right away,
Yeah.
or Phantom Menace even, right? Like that's just it's out there enough where it's not, it's not the go-to. Whereas if you had a New Hope or Empire, those Return, those are the ones that are gonna get most people, I think, to be engaged without necessarily having any baggage or anything.
No, I agree, and I think the prequels are there too in the sense of like because they've been out for what 25 years at this point, 24,
Mm-hmm.
25 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think people have appreciated that. I think all the Clone Wars, all the prequel content kind of helped strengthen that
Oh yeah.
particular trilogy. So I think you can put that on in the background too, and be like, oh wait, oh that's young 3PO or young Anakin or Obi-Wan Kenobi, blah blah blah, and with those actors still being working till at this day, it's kind of like it helps people say, oh, I can go back and watch this stuff, knowing that these actors are still around. They got other
Mm-hmm.
properties, or they might still be being used. I mean, I know there's rumor of there's always stories coming out of like Anakin or coming back or Obi-Wan, whatever. But yeah, look, I think when it comes to the films, the go-to of mine is obviously, like I said, Empire,
Mm.
Revenge of the Sith. I'm looking forward to watching that movie again, just because it's to me that's one of the strongest Star Wars films, beginning to end. I think the strongest one from beginning to end is Revenge of the Sith, A New Hope, and Empire. I think for a casual fan, it has everything you want when it comes to Star Wars. That's why to me those are a lot of go-tos for me, because like it's strong storytelling. Is the dialogue perfect? No. But you know what though? The story beats are amazing and it keeps you engaged from beginning to end.
It's funny, just going slightly off topic here for a moment. As I was, doing my miniatures and, Clone Wars was on, I've watched it so many times, but for whatever reason, this specific rewatch, I've noticed so many like direct lines pulled from Revenge of the Sith that they use in season 1 of the Clone Wars. Like
Yeah.
so many moments, like this is where the fun begins. Like Ahsoka says that, and it just like so many other little Revenge of the Sithisms in those first few episodes alone. I was like, "Yo, this
Think
is like
about it, though. That
almost
came out like
overdrive."
2008, 2009,
Yeah.
or whatever it was. So like maybe it was like 07, 08. I can't remember, but like it's literally the end of Revenge of the Sith whenever they were making Clone Wars. I mean, like so that was George Lucas's baby at that point. That's how
Hmm.
he was going to expand Star Wars away from the movies, was with the Clone Wars movies and series. And some of the video games. So, which again, we didn't even talk about the video games as something that's a go-to story of ours. And I'm sorry to transition this, Chris, but how can we not talk about the Force Unleashed game? Like the first one that they made. That's a go-to story because I have both the audiobooks and I can
Oh.
listen to those all day. Like that's how good that first game was for sure. That audiobook is so dope. I recommend anybody. I think Sean Williams wrote that book. I think Jonathan Davis is the narrator, or is it Mark Thompson? It's one of two. I have it on my phone. But
Wow.
if you are a fan of Star Wars and if you're a fan of Sam Witwer,
Mm-hmm.
you need to listen to the Force Unleashed book. Jonathan
Yeah.
Davis is the narrator. He
Okay.
is so good. He's another one besides Mark Thompson that does a really good job with the books.
Yeah, I
So check
mean,
out the Force Unleashed audiobook. Doesn't disappoint.
I think those are the books where you get his official name because I remember like people on forums and stuff were talking about Galen Merrick, and I was like,
Yeah,
"Who the hell is that?" And then
I don't know if he says
they're
it in the
like,
game.
they're like, "Oh, that's Star Killer." It's like, when was that information in the video game? I played the game
Yeah,
twice, and they're like, "Oh, it's a book." I said, "A book? What do you mean a book? There's a book based on the video
he
game?" Like
doesn't.
I didn't understand the
He doesn't say it in the
concept.
game, but in the book, and I know the exact scene. It's whenever he is going to go after the senators that were kidnapped after their secret meeting,
Hmm.
and Ju- uh, Juno Eclipse is flying him into the heart of the Death Star, and she's like, Am I going to see you again?" He's like, "No, probably not." She's like, "Well, I'm not going to live this down," and she like pulls him and makes out with him,
Huh.
and then I think that's when he says, "My name's Galen Merrick," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's a kind of interesting name." And he like uses the Force and jumps out of the ship, and I'm
Huh.
thinking, and the sound effects is dope. They do a good job at building it up, and I'm like, "Yeah, this is fire." Like, man, that they need to make that into a trilogy, like a movie or a series.
I'm so. Hmm. Okay, I guess the game's been out long enough. I was really,
Or
really, really holding on hope that he would show up in Jedi Survivor. He did not, but hey, there's probably going to be another game, so I have another chance for him to come back in canon in the next game. But
yeah.
yeah, I know there's even concept art of him coming into Rebels, like going to be in like
Okay, so
Rebels
so
even
so
at some
Chris,
point.
maybe this is another podcast topic. Maybe for one of our next podcasts in the future over the summer, we can talk about what would be Star Killer's role in an upcoming Star Wars game, like the third Star Wars Jedi series
Mm-hmm.
that's out here right now. What would that look like? What would we want him to do in that game? What would that storyline look like?
Hmm.
We can
Oh,
do a fan fiction podcast
I
on that.
have ideas already based off how that game ended.
Here we
There
go.
we go.
So Chris, if you want to do a 2 hour, I wouldn't be against doing a special 2 hour podcast, maybe three. You want to talk about a fan fiction Star Killer showing up in the third Star or Jedi game in the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm
All
sure you
right.
already written these down on your phone somewhere.
All right, Ben, write that down.
Yeah, I'm saying, hey, there we go.
Oh man.
But yeah,
I mean,
like,
look.
go on.
Oh, go ahead. I'm about to say. I'm just saying. Look, it's just you're right. I think that character will be so dope in today's Star Wars. I mean, and we can talk about that further. But imagine pulling him into the canon somehow. You can make that work, but
Mm-hmm.
that's another podcast for another day.
I mean, if you listen to Sam Witwer talk, he's open to playing him.
Yep.
So
Sam's what 40-some years old. Don't
Yeah.
look like it.
I think he
No.
But
just turned 41 or 42, I think.
yeah, like he's in hella shape. He's a really good actor. He ain't bad looking. So like he'll do most of his stunts. He'll commit to the role. He knows Star Wars, and he's not a fan where he's over the top. He's a fan where he knows his stuff, but he'll let the creators still do their thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think he was actually on a couple like back in the day on Collider. He was like a part of those trivia shows every once in a while. He would
Yeah,
school like
he was.
everybody on those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's one of the. Again, this is probably another podcast for another day. Like that who's that Star Wars actor that you just genuinely would hang out with, be
Yeah.
friends with? Sam Witwer would be that guy for me. I would actually like just shoot the shit with him. Like, hey, let's have a beer. Let's talk Star Wars. Hell, let's just talk life. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like he's that type of guy. Him and Hayden Christensen, I would hang out with.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
like,
go ahead, Ben.
Go on, Chris. Oh, well, I go on.
I was just gonna say, we have Jesse Bennett in the chat giving his ideas. Oh goodness, he recently found himself going back to the Master and Apprentice, the book story between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. Yeah, I gotta revisit that. That would be a book I definitely would want to revisit, like a few years before Phantom Menace.
Is that
Dealing.
so? I don't think I've read that one yet. That's Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, right?
Yeah, it's a Claudia Gray book too.
Okay, I need to check that out because I think I need to
Yeah.
get that on my queue.
You got to get that. You got to get Brotherhood by Mike Chen. That's another that
Okay,
one came
so
out last summer.
Okay, so go to stories that I probably need to look into. So I guess I'll need you guys' help on this because I need to actually sit down and download some new ones. So you said Master and Apprentice.
Yep, and he says he's doing a current rewatch of Kenobi.
Okay.
So that's a cool thing. Is like, all this is subjective. So you're gonna get so many other different answers. Where I said, oh, maybe Kenobi wouldn't be on that list. Jesse's like, hey, I'm watching it right now, so it's definitely on mine.
Yeah.
So that's the cool part about all this.
So I have. So speaking of, like, I have because of Kenobi, I have the John Jackson Miller book, the Obi-Wan book.
Oh yeah.
The Kenobi
Love that book.
Yeah, that came out like what, mid 2000, late 2000,
right before
like
the Disney sold, or
yeah,
Disney
I think 2012 or 13.
Yeah, I have that one, and it's been forever since I've listened to that one. But I do want to check out that Master and Apprentice, because you guys know I like the Jedi Apprentice books. Obi-Wan is a young apprentice to Qui-Gon, and they didn't do those on Audible yet, which I'm shocked. Like, just do those on Audible. I'll listen to those all day. But I love those covers. And we find out that Qui-Gon had a apprentice prior to Obi-Wan. I'll check out those that Master and Apprentice books. That sounds.
Wait, really? I wonder who the apprentice was.
I forget. It begins with an X. It's like Xandor.
Okay, so it's not. It's not Rael Averas. Okay.
It's like Xander or Xandor or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
But yeah, like those books would be fantastic to be on Audible eventually, because they're great stories, and that's like. Well, that's the great thing with like those books or any of the like the audio books, is like they're nice to like connect into. Gosh, me and Milton could host a 3-hour audiobook discussion, but the audiobooks are so nice because like it's like you're listening to the show, or when you're listening to a book, it's basically a show, but it's like you're listening to a show before you watch Kenobi, before you watch Phantom Menace, before you watch like for me. For example, right now I'm listening to basically it takes me because I space it out. All these Thrawn books I'm listening to are about 14 hours a piece. So basically I listen to like 40 minutes a day or so. So it takes me like 2.5 weeks to get through, 2.5-3 weeks to get through one book, and basically I'm spacing these out. So then it's like leading up to Ahsoka, because like they've taken plenty of inspiration from the Ahsoka series from the original Zahn trilogy, right. And it's just kind of like leading up into the Ahsoka show. And then I think actually I've already decided what I'm gonna listen to after this. After I finish up this trilogy, I noticed on Audible, it's cool. There's a feature on there for anybody that has it, you'll know, but like. It actually shows you the next book that's in like order of like the story that you're listening to. So like after Last Command, it's already previewing me the next book after that. It's called Hand of Thrawn Part 1.
Yeah.
And like that it's saying like, oh, that's the next book after Last Command. So it's like it's cool. Audible kind of like tells you what's coming up, and I'm probably gonna like continue like down this path of like whatever these. Wherever it leads me with the Zahn books, but it's cool because it's kind of, like we said, they're nice to pass the time, and it's just like listening to shows versus actually watching them. But we're all such like astute Star Wars fans, like you could listen to a New Hope and know exactly what it looks like.
Right.
So like you can generally listen to these Star Wars audiobooks, whether it's the Thrawn trilogy, whether it's the Master and Apprentice books, whether it's any of these books. I mean, heck, even when I listened to Bloodline, for example, like I was imagining a older Leia, all these things going on in Bloodline. Like I was imagining those things because like we know the Star Wars world so well, we can generally get a picture in our head of what they are. Like, I mean, there was a scene in Dark Force Rising early in the book when Luke and Lando are on a planet and Luke's at a bar, and like it's kind of like mirroring the A New Hope situation with Obi-Wan in the cantina, where like, there's a couple bar patrons like arguing about something, and like everybody in the bar is like, looking to Luke to be like the Jedi to solve everything. And like, Luke, the way they describe it, it's like described perfectly. And even Luke like has like a little memory of like the cantina and stuff. So like, just like how they describe things in these audiobooks, it's such like a nice way to pass the time for like several things, whether it be like in the background, like we said, when you're building things, or like for me right now, I'm or for anybody really, but for me right now, I'm going through a dieting phase. Like I'm down almost 20 pounds, whatever. And during my cardio sessions, I listen to like 40 minutes of the book. Or like if I'm doing like a harder cardio day where I'm doing like an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening type cardio day, I'll literally listen to like an hour of the book and then another hour of the book, just because it's so entertaining. It passes the time so easily. You don't even think about like the hour going by. It's just boom, like it's entertaining.
Yeah, the monotonous stuff you do. You can focus.
Yeah, the monotonous stuff. It's like these type of things are such a great way to pass the time as a Star Wars fan, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's by no means like a slight on them either. It's like, oh yeah, well we're watching these because we're only half paying attention. It's because we've watched them so often or experienced them so often, listened to them, that we know the story, but we like to have those touch points of, oh, I love when this part comes up. Let me pay attention here. This part's really fun. Oh, this is a really funny part. Oh, I love this part right here. Yeah, so that's really what it all comes down to. So yeah, but
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well that, I mean, that's another good point there in and of itself. It's like you said, it's not because it's like, oh, it's whatever, we're throwing it on in the background. We know it so well, and like me, or like for several hardcore Star Wars fans, we've all read the original Zahn trilogy years ago. But for me, I don't know when the last time I read Heir to the Empire or Dark Force Rising or Last Command. So like me, when I got to the end of Dark Force Rising today, I forgot there was like a little like twist at the end, and I was like, oh man, I forgot about that. Like that's awesome. Like, so it's just cool like getting those realizations when you're like, even though you're casually listening to certain things, like, I know the general gist of like the Dark Force Rising book, but then when I got to the end, I'm paying more attention because I'm like, man, I don't remember exactly what happens here. Mm-hmm. And then I get to the end and I'm like, whoa, that was really cool. So like, it's cool revisiting old material like that because it's just, it re-sparks your interest even more.
Hell yeah. So we would like to know what your go-to Star Wars stories are. Throw them down in the comments section down below. Interact with us on Twitter using hashtag outerrimtransmission.
So I know we're trying to wrap this up. Chris, I have one question that we all post to the group. Well, we all answer for each other. Mm-hmm. What would be if you had a random friend of yours that was saying, hey, what go-to story should I go to for Star Wars? Let's just say book-related, hardcover or audiobook. If you had to pick one Star Wars story to give that person to get into the books, what would you tell your random friend that's just a decent Star Wars fan that just wants to at least like get into it? And I'll go first.
Have they at least seen the movies 1 through 6, for example?
They've seen
or the original trilogy here and there.
Yeah, they've seen the original trilogy. They've seen the prequels here or there. That's it. That's pretty much all they know. Okay. I would say for me, a Star Wars story that I think, especially if it's a girl, if a fan who's a girl, I would say Lost Stars would be a good story for them to start off with, because they got the love story, they got some of the action. It's a time, kind of like a timepiece, like it goes over time, like that particular story, and it's two different sides of Star Wars: Empire, Rebellion. How it's different. Kind of like Romeo and Juliet type thing in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
I think Lost Stars is a very, very underrated story. I think some casual Star Wars fans will get into.
Yeah, you can go, Ben, because I'm still thinking.
Yeah, I mean, Lost Stars is excellent. The audiobook for that is very good if you haven't listened to that yet, Milton. But yeah, the audiobook's really good for that one. For me, oh man, that's a tough one. There's so many good stories when it comes to all the books and everything. But for me, even though like I've talked so much about it already on this podcast, I would say for like anybody, like say if they've just even seen the original trilogy, like I really think Heir to the Empire, just the first book, Heir to the Empire, is such a good book because it's self-contained. Like they make references to the original stuff, so you don't necessarily even need to watch the original trilogy to get the gist of the basis of that book, because like they set the premise, the Empire's been defeated, they're scrapping around, the rebels are still scrapping around with the government, like you have the political intrigue in there with Leia and Mon Mothma and all those people, you have the heroics of Luke and Han and Lando and Chewie and all those storylines, and then you have this new cunning villain, Grand Admiral Thrawn,
Yep.
coming from like the
Yep.
unknown regions. And like I think it's such a good standalone story that I think I could recommend it to anybody. And then especially, spoilers, the way it ends, Admiral Akbar getting arrested at the end, that's kind of a hook, you getting pulled into the next book. So like, it's a good launching point, I think, for Star Wars fans, because it sets the tone. Like, it literally talks about this being 5 years after the events of basically Return of the Jedi. So like they it's a good tone setter, I think, for someone just getting into the Star Wars books.
I mean, I want to go with the easy softball for me, and that's it's either going to be Light of the Jedi, because that's easy for me to recommend, because it's like you don't have to know anything about Star Wars to read that book, because it's literally all new characters, and it's a really interesting situation that happens with the great hyperspace disaster where you're learning from different perspectives of civilians, of military, of engineers, of Jedi, of people that are working to save others, like emergency response people. So it really gives you a wide breadth of perspectives and just gets you right into the action really quickly. But then I'll throw another one for familiar characters that you do know. I would recommend maybe Shadow of the Sith, because Shadow of the Sith by Adam Christopher came out also last summer. Really gives you that great Lando and Luke Skywalker after Return of the Jedi vibe story that felt a lot like Legends. I know Heir to the Empire's Legends. So if you want a similar feel to that, where it's like, what are these guys doing after the war's over? What are they doing? Oh, they're going on a mission to find somebody, and it's getting involved with Sith artifacts that possess people, and you see Luke Skywalker in his prime just taking fools out. It's got everything you want, and it's got some really touching moments with Lando Calrissian that I wasn't expecting. So there you go. If you want the in current timeline, go with Shadow of the Sith. If you want way back in time, go with that or
Also,
let me do this first before I forget. Legends, I'll say Darth Bane trilogy.
Yeah.
Because that is just, to this day, it's just, oh man, I still remember that from like over 10 years ago. I read it now. Just those key moments. I was literally talking to somebody at the gym. I'll go on a digress real quick. I used to be called Star Killer for whatever reason at the gym, because one day I was talking about Star Killer and somebody just started calling me that after I had the conversation. And then another guy at the training at the gym was like, something about Star Killer, and then I said Darth Bane. and then he's like, who's Darth Bane? And then I was like, oh, I have to tell you about Darth Bane. And I immediately smiled. He's like, you don't know? I was like, you don't know about Darth Bane? So I was telling him all this stuff about Darth Bane, like going through the atmosphere from Duxon to whatever the hell the planet is that's in season 5 of the Clone Wars with like the dinosaur things and Saw Gerrera. What the hell is that planet called?
I forget.
Ah, man, it's
Nope.
Onderon.
Oh, yep.
There's
that's
that
what it
moment
is.
in the book where he actually goes from Onderon to Duxon on the back of one of those winged creatures, and he actually like goes through the atmosphere for a few seconds, but he's like using the force to like protect his body. Like this crazy stuff this guy does. So I'm like, if you want like a really cool dark side story of a really mature Star Wars story that's self-contained trilogy, like you got to do Darth Bane. And they recently did the Essential Legends collection, so you get like the nice trade paperback size of like the trilogy, 3 books that way. Sorry, Ben, I had to point that out. 'Cause I was
yeah.
like, oh, I have to talk about Darth Bane.
Yeah, the Darth Bane trilogy, that's excellent. But I was going to say, to go in your vein of like complete standalone type stories, for me, like I said, of course, the Heir to the Empire book's great. And like all of our recommendations have been great. But if someone who's looking to get into a Star Wars book and has a little hint of liking like scary movies and stuff, for me, the number one book recommendation by a mile, and this is for like anybody really, a really entertaining book, is the Legends book Death Troopers.
Oh, I just read that recently.
Yeah.
Yep, that book is fantastic, and like it's completely standalone, all new characters basically, and like it sets the tone, and it's kind of scary, kind of creepy, and it's such a good story, and like that's another story I would love to see made into a live action movie, because and like really lean into the horror vibes. But like I think that's a really good book for a Star Wars fan who kind of likes a lot of scary movies, because that could give them kind of like the scary movie vibes, but in Star Wars. And, like I said, it's just a great story overall.
Yeah, and that's also part of the Essential Legends collection, and I
Yep.
read that I think around October. So I read it. I was like, oh, this is perfect for that time of year. But yeah. Also, so what are some Star Wars books you would recommend? Let us know in the comments or after the fact. Again, just tag Star Wars and go ahead and do hashtag outerrimtransmission. And you can always email us at outerrimtransmission@gmail.com. So we want to thank everybody, including Jesse Bennett, for joining us live today for the lively conversation. And as our new time here is now on Sundays at 7 p.m. Eastern. We would love for you guys to join us every Sunday at 7 p.m. For our episodes there on after, as well on podcast services. You can download us. Like I said, I'm going to try to get these up around Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning for listening on the go if that's what you prefer. Just a heads up. Next week, we could be getting some Star Wars game news because we are at that time of the year, everybody. Going into this week, it's basically E3, but not really E3 because even though E3 doesn't exist, you're having many gaming companies like Microsoft, like Jeff Keighley's doing a Summer Gaming Fest, and Ubisoft, who we know is working on a Star Wars game, is doing their thing next week. So whether Jeff Keighley reveals it, whether Microsoft announces a game on Sunday, a week from today, maybe we'll have some breaking news to talk about and speculate. Maybe we'll have a trailer to break down. I'm really hoping so. I think, it's a good time to start talking about other Star Wars games because we know there's a lot of in development, and we've seen how much of a smash hit that Jedi Survivor was, and that buzz is, kind of coming down now that the game's been out for months. So now we're going to look ahead to see what's coming down the gaming space. So I'm crossing my fingers and my toes here to hopefully have something to talk about, some really cool news next week. So be on the lookout for that. I'm sure you'll see it all over Twitter, all over Facebook if there is something coming out with that.
Nice.
All
Should be a
right.
good week.
So yeah, it's gonna be a good week. Where can the people find you, Milton?
You guys can find me on Twitter at MiltonWeber7 or Instagram at Milton7Weber. Pretty much all I do is talk, well, on Instagram, I like to just post funny stuff in my stories or like some workout stuff in my videos. Twitter, I just like retweet and just make fun of just like stupid shit in the world. So just check me out there. I like to keep it positive. Don't act a fool. If you come in my DMs acting crazy, I'm blocking you, or I might have to show up at your doorstep and smack you. But yeah, find me at those platforms. Have a good conversation, and like I said, just go have a good rest of the week, man.
There we go. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me talking Star Wars and fitness stuff on Twitter at Real Ben Maynard. Sometimes just being sarcastic about some of the things going on in the Star Wars fandom because, hey, we got to laugh about it and not take things so seriously. And then you can find me on Instagram as well at Real Ben Maynard. I usually post my workouts and stuff. I haven't been lately just because I've been just like locked in and just haven't really turned on the camera to record my workouts. But you can connect with me on Instagram at Real Ben Maynard, and we can share some funny Star Wars and reels or funny other reels. I mean, I'm always blowing up Milton's inbox with Star Wars reels, it feels like, but it's always a good time on Instagram. Yeah, they're always funny though, or good WWE ones on there for sure.
That too.
Yeah, and you can find me over in Sanctuary slaying demons on my level 23 rogue. I totally invested in Diablo 4 right now. It's early access. As of recording this, it'll be out tomorrow for everybody else. Amazing game, and I went down a kind of rabbit hole last night getting into the lore. I was looking up a bunch of the lore videos for the world of Diablo. Even though it's a number 4, does not mean you should stay away because you haven't played the other games. It's very much a game you can jump into not knowing anything about Diablo and getting a good idea of what the universe and what the story is. So there, you'll find me there, Starrapter, hashtag 1298 on Battle.net. Go ahead, group up, let's get some experience points and kill some demons. So that's what I'll be doing the rest of this week. So, for Ben, for Milton, for Chris, aka Starrapter, that was Outer Rim Transmission, episode 109. We hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll see you again next week in Transmission.